Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I'm AA Ron, and this is the Inclusive Dad Podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Lisa Drennan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Erin. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't you just start us off by just telling my audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from just south of Boston, and I have 40 years experience working, trying to make a more inclusive world and supporting folks with disabilities to be active, engaged in their communities. So my story actually starts working in the field, supporting adults with intellectual developmental disabilities. And a good portion of that time was in a recreation center setting. I was the recreation director. But it was just for these folks. All the programs and events we had were crafted and designed for folks with IDD. So now move forward in 2014, I joined my local YMCA and became the first ever association director of inclusion. So now my big whoa aha moment happens because 30 years previously I had only worked with these folks and worked with instructors who worked with these folks.
Mhm.
Now I'm thinking about how do I help teach the typical camp counselor or a yoga instructor, somebody works the front desk, or teach the basketball league. How do I help share my background and knowledge with them to help them to be more inclusive, to invite into what they already have existing? So really, led the inclusion initiative at the Y, and YUSA was noticing what I was doing and had me run a like a platform. It was called Diverse Abilities Working Group for Ys across the country, and it was there that I realized, whoa, every Y that I speak to can benefit from my unique background and experience and my new vision of it wasn't about creating new programs or adaptive specialized programs for
Mhm.
this population. It was about creating inclusive spaces where people are together side by side. So that really was the jumping off point for me to start Merge. So I started Merge in 2018. I work with recreation and camp and sport, or really any community organization seeking to be more inclusive in their practices. And that's what brings me here to you today.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for the audience, I was honored to join training Lisa did in Minnesota for the Park and Rec Association, I believe. So I went up there and saw her present her workshop on inclusion and had a great day meeting other people. She allowed me to share a little bit of my story, which was good for me to do that too. So just thank you for that again, letting me share my story in your workshop to the people that were there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a key component of really
Right.
thinking inclusively is listening to the disability community or the families that support them. And I think that if I may say that was probably one of the most impactful parts of the whole, for I think it was like a 5-hour training, right? That
Yeah.
to hear it from a dad and hear the passion in your voice about, first of all, thanking them for being here and trying to think about opening up their programs and be more inclusive, but
Yeah.
just really just sharing from your perspective what that means. So it was impactful, and it was impactful. It moved me as well. So I thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you. So when you were growing up, do you ever remember like hearing about disability or special education?
Yeah, so growing up, my parents' best friend had a daughter, and she had intellectual developmental
Mhm.
disabilities. So she was literally, we grew up together, and she
Okay.
was part of the family. They were, kind of like cousins to us, right? And so I always had embedded that it was no big deal. Like, I don't want to use her name, but, I'll just say Mary, right? Mary was just part of the family. And I grew up spending time with her and didn't really, I don't know, see it as anything different. So I think my parents, through that, created an inclusive mindset in me, where I knew that a lot of her peers were probably, either sent away or in institutions or, other settings, and not really, living at home. And she still lives at home to this day. So that was kind of my background there.
Right.
Not really so much aware of special education, because in our schools, those kids went somewhere else, right? And so you
Right.
really didn't see them. Or unfortunately, there was, if somebody did ride the bus, there was a lot of bullying and a lot of teasing, and that bothered me tremendously, and I kind of stood out as the person who would stick up for that person, just because it didn't feel right. Even though, probably, some of the kids thought I was a goody two shoes, or why are you doing that? But I just couldn't sit and watch that happen. So I remember those feelings young, like in elementary or middle school, feeling that.
Yeah, it's interesting because my story is I don't ever remember like hearing the word disability or special education at all
Mm,
before my daughter was born. I mean, I probably heard it, just it wasn't. I didn't have anybody like you did that was close to me growing up, that had a disability. So my story kind of starts after my daughter's born. So I kind of like it's interesting to me like how people's stories are kind of their connection, where it
yep,
comes from. So,
absolutely.
um, what is your definition of inclusion?
Oh, that's a good one. And I think I love that question. And I think it matters who you're talking to, right? The audience. I talk to
Right.
a lot of different audiences, but my general definition when I'm trying to, just talk to a person from the community, or if I want to, even people who work, DSPs, direct support professionals, or people who work in the field and or work at a Y. But when I'm just trying to think about changing the community, this is how I, would explain inclusion. And I start by saying what it's not. It's not a program. It's not an event, right?
Hmm.
Or done by an inclusion staff, right? Go get so and so. They
Right.
do inclusion, but it's intentional work that a community or organization wide do to ensure that every person is welcomed and they're engaged and they're supported to successfully participate. But that means successfully participate side by side with their peers.
Right.
And eventually you want to get to the final ending, the last word of inclusion to me is so that they belong. So that's what,
That's a great definition.
yeah, yeah, that's what I found.
Um,
I
yeah.
found that a lot of entities that I start to work with, or somebody might strike out a conversation, and their initial thought is, "Oh, we're inclusive, or our town has that. We have a special program for those
Hmm.
people. Tuesday at 6 p.m." Right,
Yeah.
and I have to kind of break it down. That, oh, okay, right. So that's where I start with some conversations around what I believe inclusion really is. So
Yeah, that's a great point because for me, my daughter Cece was sent to like a segregated classroom. So for me, I wanted full inclusion. So when I use the word inclusion, I would meant full inclusion. And then you go to like the IEP meeting. We'd say we want more inclusion. The school's like, yeah, we're on board with inclusion. We'll do that. And then you realize, okay, we have two vastly different definitions. So it's very important to like make sure that if they're saying inclusion, I understand what their definition is, so that
yeah, I love
I can understand where they're coming from. Otherwise, it's like we
it.
know we're going to do inclusion, then it's like, nope, that's not what I mean
That's
by
not
what I'm
inclusion.
saying
Yeah,
it.
that's not what I mean. And I often say, I put a little emphasis. I say authentic inclusion, and
Yeah,
then it's like, what does that mean? And then I explain the difference, that it's not
right,
building a separate program
right,
in your spaces for these folks over here, but it's taking what already exists. What do you already offer for the community?
yeah,
How can you welcome in to that our community members with diverse abilities? So
absolutely.
it's composed.
So obviously, I have a daughter with a disability, and let's say I'm trying to find like an inclusive activities for her, and everywhere I look, I just can't find anything. I guess that meets my definition of inclusion. Like she's with her peers, and like at a Y program. Like, do you have any tips like what I as a parent can do to um in that situation?
Yeah, no, and that happens more than
Yeah.
more than we care to think that it does. But I think the first step, again, going back to some people think they're doing inclusion because they, particularly like rec programs, because when somebody comes, to them and they're like, well, we want our daughter, our son or a family member or a person comes and says, what do you have for inclusion? Their mind automatically goes towards those specialized,
Right.
adaptive, segregated programs, right? And so I would say the first step is really, having an honest conversation with the entity, whether it's a YMCA, a camp, a town rec program, and asking to speak to somebody. I always say go to the top or somewhere, somebody who's like a program director and not
Yep.
just not that somebody on the weekend who only works weekends who
Yeah.
can't do that change, right? You want to be talking to the change makers and just asking questions about what does inclusion mean to you? And if the answer is, well, yeah, we have these programs for them,
Mhm.
little education might be helpful. So, I mean, and I know it's hard and not every parent has the time to be sitting there educating
Yeah.
everybody what inclusion is and isn't, but that's where I could come in or another practitioner who is helping organizations to be more inclusive. So, making a recommendation, but I always say like gently and kindly, right? Because I know working in the Y, there were people who were very proud of, well, we have this special program.
Mhm.
We're very proud of it. And if I came in like this, like that's not
Yeah.
inclusion, oh, that could really set somebody to
Yeah.
not want to cooperate, or feel offended. So I always want to do it gently. Like these are great. These are wonderful opportunities for community members who maybe might be hesitant to take a typical swim class. So it's great that you have your sensory swim. What do you have in place to help a person transition from that sensory swim to a typical swim? And just by asking those questions, you're kind of just saying like, that's actually possible. So I think, providing the opportunity to share about education. And number two, I think this is important. Tell stories, right? So whether it's we had a good experience, we moved from this other town and they had this
Right.
happened, and let me tell you the story about this person or myself or whoever, is the person speaking. Tell stories of what it does look like. Oh yeah, they went to camp with
Mhm.
their friend, they made a best friend, and it really changed their lives. And all it took was, a few accommodations and some steps that I can put you in touch with somebody who can help you with that. So when you tell
Yeah.
stories, you make it possible. Because otherwise people think, well, we do this, that should be okay. We can't do full inclusion. We don't know how. We are not specialists, or we don't have backgrounds. And
Right.
be told you don't really need a specialized background. You
Right.
need an open heart and more so an open mind. And if you have those, you can learn the specifics, right? I'm going to ask you as a dad, Aaron, when you were, handed your daughter and you said you had no experience with special education or people with disabilities. Um, that did not, disqualify you from being a dad. Guess what? You figured it out,
Yep.
and so can other people. And the thing is, you work as a team, so you would work with that rec department or YMCA to say, here, let's do this together, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that would be my response.
Yeah, that's a great response. It's just, I mean, as a parent, you mean, especially with, a child that has a lot of different needs. It's just, you only have so much energy. So then it becomes more of like, okay, how much time do I want to spend
Yeah,
talking with them? Or you're just kind of, you don't have time. So then for me, it's like, inclusion is the right thing to do. So it's hard for me to like do the whole political or like, like talk nicely and, that
mhm,
part. So it's, for me, it's harder to do, I think, because I'm just like, I know it's the right thing. I want to do it and I want it to be done now. I don't want it to like take
yeah,
5 years to get there.
yeah.
So my daughter's already
Oh,
too old. So like,
absolutely.
so there's that for me, it's like that whole piece of it as well.
I know. And that's, to be honest, I think I might have shared this in the presentation that I did there, but I do my work and I am driven by stories like yours. So it helps me to hear that, to
Right.
remind myself to be out there and to help change cultures and communities so that, you don't have time for this.
Right.
Like I don't fully understand, but I can imagine how, how much it takes of you to provide supports for your daughter. And then you got to fight this battle too. So that's why I'm here. So you can just quickly go
Yeah.
tag your id. Here's a woman that can help you do it. And this is
Right.
fantastic. And I'm going to say this off the record. No, I'm just kidding. But,
Yeah.
that way we don't get into a legal
Right.
lawsuit, a civil right lawsuit about, the
Yeah.
American with Disabilities Act, because she legally has a right to belong. So I'm
Yeah.
glad we don't have to go that way. Here's Lisa's phone number.
Right.
And
Yeah.
just pass the buck to me, and I'll take over because you have enough on
Right.
your plate.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think you talked a little bit about this next question in your answer to the last one, but do you have any tips on how to, like, if I'm looking for, some activities for my daughter, how, like, I could if I want to research an organizations, or like questions to ask, like, the person at the organization, like, to help me, like, determine it, like, their level of inclusion, or if they're open to inclusion?
Yeah, I think, again, I'm going to point to finding the right person who would know more. So at a Y, it might be your associate exec, or
Okay.
depending on if it's aquatics that you're interested in, the aquatics director, but definitely go up to the top.
Right.
And, that's where you inquire, what do you already have in place that my daughter might participate in, or
Right.
what could we envision together, right? So you want to ask what they have already, and in 9 out
Right.
of 10 times it's going to be, oh, we do, or we don't have anything, or we do have this specialized or adaptive program for her Tuesdays at 6
Yep.
p.m., right? So finding out, and then the next step would be, have you ever had a training that would help your organization wide, right? And emphasizing that the training should be for all, not
Right.
just one person. I would ask, their few and far in between now, unfortunately, since COVID. But WISE used to have a inclusion specialist or coordinator. Maybe they'd call it accessibility. Somebody has the
Mhm.
responsibility of accessibility at their WISE. So you could ask that question too. Do you already have somebody on board who this is their role, whether it's a formal title or it's kind of put on the plate of somebody who maybe works in, childcare area, right? Child
Right.
um, care areas. But that would be a place. If you're looking at a town rec, you could ask, do they have a TR, or therapeutic recreation specialist,
Mhm.
that you can talk to, right? But then again, I would want to, most TRs or programs that have somebody, a specialist in their city or town, they mostly have separated or segregated programs where they use their specialty to work with that child to provide an opportunity for a small group of children, teens, or adults, right?
Mhm.
So I would again, use those words: full inclusion. What do you have for how do you support full inclusion or
Mhm.
authentic inclusion? So yeah, it's finding the right person and then using those terms to really whittle out, what does that look like? Is it just persons with physical disabilities, developmental
Mhm.
disabilities, or neurodiversity? Or is she with peers? Or would she be
Yeah.
with peers? So that would be the question, just to really whittle down what you would be looking for.
Yeah,
Start there.
that makes sense. So, like, the person who is a therapeutic rec assistant in that position, do they have to do they normally have, like, a degree that's in that? Is that how
Yeah,
they?
absolutely.
Okay.
They are actually, it's wonderful when I work with an organization that has that position,
Okay.
because they have to have a degree and they have to go through certain testing and they have to have
Sure.
a number of hours in the field where they're supervising programs that use them. There are parts of the country where it is like they might even have a whole team, depending on how big the city is,
Right.
um, that, of TRs. But there's also parts, like it's very rare in certain parts of the country where they just don't have that at all.
Mhm.
It's just a strange phenomenon why it's so important in some areas.
Right.
However, I want to point out again, mostly when a town or city has that, then they're back in that specialized or maybe even an integrated approach where somebody who comes in is assigned this one person and they get 2 or 3 teens who are going
Right.
to join this activity. So they're not really fully
Yeah.
included, or they're just going to have a separate activity over here just for them. It's a step towards, but I always say if you have those specialized either programs or supports like a TR, therapeutic recreation specialist, that you would use those as a way to always should be moving towards full inclusion,
Yep.
right? Because I don't want to give the impression that you shouldn't have any special programs, right? I think we have too many because people feel like that's what inclusion is. But once
Yeah.
they have that mindset shift that, oh, we should put more focus on looking at all of our programs and how can we include in kids and help them move from that specialized program up toward full inclusion. So always moving towards more independence, right? So that you're fading away, right? Your aid and fade, I call it. You're fading away that support or that person or that aid or the one-to-one that they're required to come with. Our ultimate goal isn't to just always give them a staff to take
Yep.
care of them.
Yep.
Our ultimate goal is to how do we help for this individual to meet their goals, to be with their peers side by side, doing what
Right.
they love, right? Activities of choice, not just what do we have on Tuesday at 6 p.m.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm not sure you can do this, but can you briefly like go through the 5 models? You kind of were talking about your 5 models of like from
Yeah,
most restrictive to full
yeah,
inclusion and
absolutely.
how that works.
Yeah. So when you think of a group, a class, or an event, right? So, here it is right here. Now, there are people in there in that group class event. So I'm going to go through I call it models of participation. And it spells out how a person with a disability may or may not participate relative to their non-disabled peers, right? Or with who is neurodivergent relative to their neurotypical peers. So the first model, which we understand happens, is exclusion, right? And whether intentional or not, there are places and spaces in our community, and I can hear nodding your head because you're going, yep, I
Yeah.
see them all the time, right? That are exclusive in their nature, meaning that there really isn't that welcoming, engaging, and supporting of people with disabilities. Again, whether intentional or not, maybe they just, they're on the second floor and it's a dance class and somebody who utilizes a wheelchair can't get up there, not an elevator, right? So that would be exclusion. Or there's just not an invitation, or they've been told, no, we can't take you. So that's exclusion, right? And then the next step is specialized or adaptive. And even in some circles, they strongly say segregated. So, but I'm going to say specialized. So that's where a particular class or event is occurring, and it's designed for a certain population. Autism swim, wheelchair basketball, maybe a social skills for teens who are neurodivergent, right? And so the instruction, the space, everything is set up specifically designed for this population, but it's only this population. So here they are here. Here's the, typical swim classes is here, on all these days. And here is the ones that is specialized for kids with autism. Okay, that's specialized. Now, if you move up to integrated, and I like to give this example, middle school dance, right? So you have 3 teens who want to go to the dance, but they're not quite ready. And I understand that. I get that. So they are provided a paraprofessional to go with them, and they review expectations, they go over social skills, and that paraprofessional is their tether to help them because they're a little nervous, maybe parents a little nervous, but they want them to go to this dance, right? They don't want them to just go to the special dances that are run by organizations just for people with disabilities. They want to go. They want them to have this normative experience like their peers. So there's that paraprofessional. Here are those 3 teens. They kind of go into the dance together, but they're tethered. But now they're starting to have some social interactions, right? And some maybe engagement, or the paraprofessional is saying, oh, see over there, they're lining up to order their sodas, right? Or whatever it is that they're doing. They're buying their tickets here. This is what's happening now, so that they're using the setting as a place to teach social skills, interaction. Maybe they're practicing some of that, but it's still, they're tethered to that staff, and they're probably the only kids there who have an adult walking around with them. So it's closer to authentic inclusion than a specialized or being excluded, right? Because maybe they've been excluded, or maybe they made their own special dance for them, but now it's closer, right?
Yep.
So that's the third one. The fourth one is unified. I call it peer buddy. And that's when an organization, and sometimes it's an internal organization like a school, or it's something, like a Best Buddies, right? Where they work to create they're creating an event or an activity, usually sports, where they're asking for volunteers. So here's your 5 volunteers who do not have disabilities. Here's your 5 volunteers who do have disabilities. And they're kind of partnered up, right? And then they play basketball together. So that's unified or peer buddy. Now it's closer, but it's not inclusion. And here's why it's not inclusion. Number one, you're fabricating it. Number two, right, you're creating it. It's not a natural basketball rec league on Thursday nights, right? It's created, and it's already has this inequity. Here's the volunteers, and aren't they wonderful volunteering to take care of these kids, or they are coming in at a higher level, right? And that they're doing this nice, kind thing for these kids. Now, I'm exaggerating a little bit here just to make the point. It is it's toward, but what I don't want schools or communities thinking like, oh, we have inclusion, we have the special basketball game, right? And the kids and everybody cheers for them, and it's wonderful. It's very unlikely that an authentic friendship is going to occur from that. Are they really invited to the birthday parties, the gathering, the football game, or do they just connect only at these events, practice from 6 to 7 every Thursday night for the month, right? So that's unified, and it's closer because now people are learning more, they're seeing more, it's bringing up disability awareness. That's a good thing, but it's not full inclusion. So full inclusion is where you take an already existing activity, a community event, right? And you provide, you systematically are okay with changing or altering how something runs to make it more inclusive. Where before, back in integration, your support comes from that one person, and they're teaching these 3 kids how to fit in. It's not about fitting in, it's about changing the systems. So then they more naturally fit in. So you might, have in place accommodations or modifications. We might alter how we do something so that it works for everybody. And that's where we want to be spending more time and place there, right? More places and spaces in authentic inclusion. So it is different. It's the system changes, not you have to bring your own support, because then that's not inclusion and they stick out. So we want to work with who we are. And it means you train everybody, right? You don't hire one person who takes care of them, because then again, you're getting back, that's kind of closer to integration, right? You don't hire somebody to be their friend. You just create spaces where it will more naturally occur. And we focus on strengths. And that's what the whole bit of inclusion is. You focus on strengths.
Yeah, that's great. You did a great job.
Ooh. Thanks.
It brought me back to the workshop when you had actually visuals on the screen where you were pointing.
Yeah.
You did a good job with your hands to kind of do.
I did my little things there. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
You've been. I'm not sure. I was thinking about this next question, and not sure I can say it without making it sound like you're old. So I apologize for that. But like, you've been doing the inclusion stuff for a few years now. Like, what is your outlook on inclusion going forward? Are you hopeful, worried? Like, what's your feeling on inclusion going forward?
Yeah, I've spent some time in the worried space, but I've kind of made a decision to come out fighting, right? I think there are more people who want to continue to do the good work around diversity and equity and inclusion, but we have to play ball with the situation that we're in now. So what I'm doing now is focusing on, just letting people know we're still out here, because it's a fact that there's some states that it's illegal to do what I do. I can't go there and do a inclusion training. So focus on things like changing our language, access and belonging. Right. Focusing on sharing with it, making sure people know I'm out here and we're still doing this work. So I do feel hopeful. At first, if I can be honest, when this whole anti-DEI stuff started coming down, I felt very protective of the
Hmm.
disability community. I felt like they're being dragged under the bus on this thing, right? And they've
Right.
already been 10 steps behind, right? When you think of a corporation who's,
Hmm.
invested in DEI, usually the focus is around race or
Yep.
gender identity and equity there, but very infrequently around disability or neurodiversity. So we were already behind. So
Yeah.
I was feeling a little like, good, another punch to the gut, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine that it could take a harder hit, but it did. However, I do feel like there's going to be a pendulum swing. And we are going to get back to, really creating spaces and really challenging people just to think about, let's look at who's around the table right now, right? And have it be about, are we making things welcoming for folks,
Hmm.
access, right? Are we really creating meaningful participation? And it's going to come back to communities, right? This isn't going to be, some big magic, corporations are going to come in and save the day with all their money. No, it's going to come back to people like you and
Right.
I who are just going to, speak up at our churches, at our, our faith organizations, and speak up at our scouts meeting and
Hmm.
or other things that are happening, town events, and try to share how can we do this better.
Yeah.
So I was a little down. I'm now getting energized and trying to get out there and do the hard work and continue to do this. It's so important. It's about human dignity. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you, and I'm already like I'm not going to watch the news for a while. I feel like because just so much stuff. So just focusing on what I can do today. Like that was part of my
yeah,
like transition more recently with the inclusion piece. Is I mean, I know it's the right thing to do, but you can't like beat somebody over the head to do it. So I just more then I get upset. So now it's just more of like personal responsibility. What can I do today to make the world more inclusive? And there are things I can do each and every day, I feel, to make it more inclusive. So just focus on that and spread
yeah,
that message. And if everybody starts doing more people start doing that, it'll start, snowballing and we can definitely make a difference. You might have to go back to some of the things that people activists did in the
yeah.
in their the actions or taking over buildings or those kind of things. I mean that I've heard about because it was before my time, but I
Mhm.
mean that would be it might happen at some point.
Yeah, yeah, and you are doing important work. You're providing this
Yeah,
platform, right? And that's
yeah,
important too, for voices to be heard and for
absolutely.
people to
Yeah,
know that, yeah, if you're the dad or the mom or the brother, the sibling or the person or the, spouse to somebody who has a disability and you're just tired, you know, lean on us, right? Like lean
yeah,
on me.
yep,
We're
for
here
sure,
and we'll change communities together.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What is one tip you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive today? So just something simple that they don't have to like spend money or, take a class, just something simple they can do starting today.
Yeah, I think just inform yourself, right? Attend trainings, learn more about this, listen to podcasts, read books or
Mhm.
movies that have a disability focus, and just, be more mindful. But, the best part of that inform is listen to the disability community and or their families. Just listen and yeah, give them a platform to speak and
Right.
share. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very important. Like, I think this phrase is like nothing about us without us. So I'm joined like in a access, or I think it's called like accessibility committee for the local arts group foundation in town, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, these are all people that they work in that area. There's no people with visible. I mean, there's no people with visible disabilities. I'm like, I told the chairperson, like, we need to find some people who actually have a disability to be on the committee because they're the ones we need to be listening to, not like the providers and everybody else. So very
Absolutely.
important.
Absolutely. I'm in that space a lot where I'm with
Yeah.
a bunch of providers, right? And I grew up in that space where
Yep.
we're the professionals who are going to
Yep.
figure out how to help
Yep.
you. And I had a change in that, or especially a course during when I started thinking more about the community, and I pushed myself hard every day to listen to the disability community
Sure.
because I do not identify as having a disability. So I can only amplify their voices. I
Sure.
can't speak for them, right?
Sure.
So but I do try to listen as much as possible, and to make sure I'm getting that lens accurately.
Absolutely. Where can everybody connect with you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'd say just pop on to my website, mergeconsulting.org. And from there, you can connect to my link tree. And my link tree will have resources, all my other social media, podcast, articles I've written. And I have a couple new articles coming up. I've written two for American Camp Association, and one's now coming up soon from the National Park and Recreation Association. So those will be up there. And other articles that I've written. So please do reach out, and I'd love to hear from anybody who's listening here. Connect in social media and say hey, right?
There you go.
Yeah, love it.
Ready for the last question?
Yeah. So,
Do you like spam lunch meat? Yes or no?
yeah.
No?
No. I used to go hiking a lot in college,
Okay.
and that was one of the things that fit in the backpacks. Would do like 2 or 3 day
Yeah.
hikes out into the
There you
Appalachians,
go.
whatnot. And no, sorry,
No,
not a
that's okay. I started when I started my podcast. I live in Austin, Minnesota, where the Spam Museum is and where they make spam. So I just asked all my guests. It's kind of interesting to see like the reaction. Like it's usually strong either ways, but
Yeah. Okay, what is it? What is the split? Have you found?
like I just published episode 44 this morning, and I think it's 22 yes, 20 no. So it's actually pretty close.
I'm very, very
So
surprising.
yeah, it's pretty
Maybe I'm
close. But
missing
it's
something.
it's usually strong either way. There's not like no like well let me
There's that
think.
little like,
It's usually boom boom yeah yeah. I saw you and I was like wow that was I don't know if that's happened before but
yeah, not my thing.
yeah it's all good.
But cheers to
Thank
you. I
you.
like the creative and eat it. So good for you.
Yeah yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure. It was my pleasure. So thanks for having me. Thanks for your
Absolutely.
work.
Thank you. To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It was truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episodes. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.